I begin this log under the dim lumen glow of Sanctorum Phage, a void station whose name does not appear on any sanctioned chart. My rosette still bears the wax of Ordo Hereticus, yet the transfer orders were delivered without signature, as if the Inquisition itself wished to remain unspoken. I am Sister Medicae Varenne of the Order Hospitaller. My oath binds me to heal and to witness, but this place tastes of neither. The air is dry as bone dust, threaded with incense whose recipe I cannot identify. The vox relays no hymns, no bells, only the low pulse of reactors buried somewhere beyond bulkheads of black iron. 30 seconds into my first circuit, I record the impossible. Stasis crypt 441 is open, not forced, open. The restraint clamps remain locked, their runes of warding intact. The lumen above still burns cobalt, signifying active suspension. Yet the body is gone. No trace of dermal frost, no spilled ichor. Only the smell of charred marrow, faint as a sensor long extinguished. I verify seals, cross-check binaric telemetry, run Auspex sweeps, closed system containment, sacred Mechanicus law, cannot be breached without alarm. But the alarms are silent. I repeat the inspection on crypt 442. Another absence. Restraints empty, shackles clamped. I test the locking servo myself and find it firm as penitential iron. Still nothing within. The lumen flickers, then steadies. My hands tremble, though I am not cold. I press the bead of the vox and send a brief report to command. The return signal is a single line of high Gothic text. Observe only. No seal. No ident. The words imprint themselves across my retinas even after I shut my eyes. The Sisters of Silence drift through these corridors like shadows of greater ships. They are taller than I imagined, armor lacquered bone white, each helm a blank mask. Their movements are precise, ritualistic, yet not mechanical. They pass me without glance, without sound. One inclines her head slightly as she goes, and the temperature drops 3 degrees by my auspex. They do not speak, but I feel them nonetheless, a pressure against the skin of thought. I know their reputation, null maidens who swallow the warp with their silence. Yet I was not prepared for the weight of that silence. It drags at the edges of my mind, stilling my pulse. My training litanies falter mid-verse. Even the lumen globes seem dimmer when they are near. Somewhere deeper in the station, a bell tolls. Single, flat, unmeasured. But my auspex registers no sound. I log environmental readings. Gravity fluctuating between 0.9 and 1.1 standard. Magnetic flux anomalous in the penitent's wing. No venting detected, no life signs except mine and the sisters. Yet I sense motion beyond the walls, like wings brushing bulkheads. At the corridor's end stands the chapel of the silent word. Its doors are carved with script in a dialect older than High Gothic, perhaps pre-unification Terran. The letters are arranged in tessellated loops. The eye cannot settle on them. When I look directly, they seem to retreat. When I glance aside, they pulse nearer. My auspex shows no heat signature beyond, but a faint subsonic hum vibrates my teeth. I hesitate at the threshold. My last communique still glows on my slate. Observe only. The sisters move past me into the chapel in single file. Each carries a small sealed reliquary. One pauses, taller than the rest, and extends a gloved hand. In her palm lies a scrap of parchment, brittle and yellowed. I accept it without thinking. She withdraws and vanishes through the door. The parchment is covered in ink, so faded it seems like old bruises. At first I think it blank. Then the letters rise like dust motes, curved, looping, unreadable. I blink. The letters shift again. My translator cogitator whirs and produces nothing but static. Yet my ears catch a whisper, low and sibilant, curling beneath the station's hum. Not sound, but the shape of sound. I press the parchment flat against my slate to photograph it. The image returns black. No matter the angle of lumen or Auspex scan, the writing eludes capture. My gloves feel damp, though the air is arid. The whisper continues, a thread of syllables I cannot pass, but which thrum against my pulse like a second heartbeat. I log the timestamp. 003142 aboard Sanctorum Phage. In less than a standard minute, my assignment has shifted from medici oversight to containment anomaly. Yet no protocol fits this breach. A closed crypt, an absent body, a parchment that speaks. The Inquisition's order, observe only, rings in my skull like a struck bell. I close my log and lift my eyes. The chapel doors have sealed of their own accord. The corridor behind me is empty. No sister remains. Even the servo skulls that patrolled earlier have withdrawn, their red optics extinguished. Only the lumen above flickers, casting long skeletal shadows of the stasis crypts across the deck. I clutch the parchment tighter. The ink warms against my palm. The whisper grows fractionally louder, not in volume, but in presence. It curls around the last line of my inner litany, a perversion of prayer. My medica oath demands I report. My inquisitorial mandate demands silence. I speak a single word into the vox, my own name, seeking anchor. The vox returns nothing but a hiss that shapes itself into the same syllables on the parchment. My pulse stutters. This is not how missions begin. This is how they end. I tighten my grip until the parchment cuts my glove. A bead of blood rises, vanishes, absorbed. For a heartbeat, I think the ink brightens, as if fed. I end this entry here. My last recorded image, empty restraints, a whispering scrap of litany in my hand, and the scent of incense over charred marrow. Beyond the sealed doors of the chapel, the silent sisters prepare for something I do not yet understand. May the Emperor keep me unseen. My boots click softly on the ossuary deck as I resume the log. Sanctorum Phage feels different when the lumen globes dim to their maintenance glow. The walls here are ribbed with stacked reliquaries and bone scrolls, sealed in plasteel and sanctified wax. Frost blooms along the seams like delicate script. The temperature registers 3 degrees lower than the main corridor, but the air tastes of warm iron. I switch to clinical mode to steady my pulse. Subject, environment, status, cold iron frost, humidity, trace incense particulates. I write each detail in medici shorthand, but the stylus stutters as though the slate resists inscription. Soft chanting filters through the bulkheads, low, unmetered, neither hymn nor machine cycle. It vibrates against my chest rather than my ears, as if the station's skeleton is murmuring. My Auspex shows no audio at this frequency. The Sisters of Silence move ahead of me, gliding between ossuary pillars. Each helm is a blank oval. Each pauldron bears a sigil of the Aquila rendered in bone. Their robes are muted red beneath armor plate, hem trailing frost. I know from the scholar records that their tongues have been excised since childhood to render them perfect nulls. Yet as they pass, I feel impressions, words without sound, brush the surface of my mind. Fragments of caution, fragments of hunger. Their psychic resonance is not speech but pressure, like deep water. One sister stops before me. She is taller, her mask etched with faint concentric rings. She opens a gauntlet and places a small sealed reliquary box into my hands. The box is ironwood banded in brass, stamped with a sigil I cannot identify. It vibrates faintly, a heartbeat too slow for human. She makes a single gesture, 3 fingers downward, then toward the left corridor that leads to the penitent's wing. No sound, yet the gesture carries weight like a command. I whisper, "What is inside?" But of course she does not answer. The vibration in the box intensifies for a heartbeat, then stills. When I glance up, she has already moved on, vanishing between pillars as though she were never there. I note the box in my log. Reliquary, weight 1.7 kilograms, temperature steady at 7 degrees Celsius, vibration intermittent, origin unknown. My stylus scratches, but the letters seem to swim on the slate. I blink until they settle. The ossuary corridor narrows. Sigils etched into the deck plate form a spiral pattern that my auspex cannot resolve. My footsteps echo out of phase with my movement. Cold breath curls from my lips, drifting upward rather than down. I open my auspex fully and run a sweep. Readings invert. Gravity vector shows 0 at all axes, yet my boots still feel the deck. Mass signatures appear negative. The station's schematic rotates without center, like a Mobius loop. My pulse quickens. I record. Readings inverted, station center indeterminate, possible warp interference. The auspex pings once, sharp, metallic, but no contact code follows. A row of servo skulls drifts past, optics dimmed, as if sleepwalking. Their sensor chains tinkle softly, but the sound is backwards, like breath drawn in. Each skull carries a strip of parchment between its teeth, script reversed. The chanting behind the bulkheads grows softer, then stops. The silence is heavier than sound. My inner ear feels a pressure change, like descent. I clutch the reliquary box tighter. Its vibration resumes, faint but steady, syncing with my pulse. My palms sweat inside my gloves, though the air is cold. I pause at a junction. The lumen globe above flickers, casting long bars of shadow across ossuary doors. My auspex display rotates, fails, then resets, blank. I tap it. No response. A whisper drifts along the corridor. Not the parchment whisper from before. This one is clear, my own voice, reciting my log entry from 30 seconds ago. It comes from the left-hand passage, the one leading deeper toward the penitent's wing. I freeze. The vox bead in my ear is silent, yet the echo continues. My own voice speaking details of cold iron frost, soft chanting through bulkheads. Each line repeats exactly, then adds a word I never spoke. The new word is my name, drawn out like a sigh. My auspex remains blank. The reliquary box trembles once, as if struck by a pulse of invisible force. I switch off the log and listen. The corridor ahead curves out of sight. My echoing voice calls again, softer now, as if beckoning. I take one step forward. The deck feels slightly angled, like a ramp, though no incline registers visually. My breath steams upward. The lumen globe behind me dies, plunging the ossuary into half dark. Another step. My own echo falls silent. The reliquary's vibration ceases. In the hush, I hear only the faint drip of condensation from bone scrolls and the distant thrum of the station's heart. I stop at the threshold of the left-hand passage. The deck here is marked with concentric circles of script too fine to read. The air smells of old parchment and something sweet, almost like burned honey. My auspex flickers, shows a single point of light ahead, then dies again. I whisper my name aloud to test the echo. From the darkness ahead, my voice returns at once, perfect pitch, but a fraction too soon, as if it anticipated me. Then silence. I tighten my grip on the reliquary. My knuckles ache. The box feels heavier now, dragging my arm slightly downward. I note one last entry in the slate by touch, heading toward penitent's wing. Readings unstable. Echo phenomenon detected. The stylus scratches but leaves no mark. I lift my head. The corridor ahead is empty, but I can feel my own voice waiting within it, like a presence. The sisters are nowhere in sight. I take a breath, tasting frost and incense. The whisper rises again, my voice but lower, slower, coming from deeper within the passage. I step forward, crossing the line of script. The temperature plunges. The reliquary box begins to vibrate violently, then abruptly stops. The lumen globe above pops, showering sparks. In the brief flash, see the corridor ahead bending at an impossible angle, vanishing into a point of darkness. I hear my own voice once more, very close now, speaking a phrase I have not yet thought. Welcome, Sister Varen. I freeze, heart hammering. The log slate flickers, displaying the same words untyped. I end the chapter here, standing at the edge of the corridor that should not exist, my own echo calling from within. The door to Ward 9 seals behind me with a hiss of stale incense. My slate logs the timestamp automatically, but the numerals flicker and reverse as if reflected in water. The lumen strips here burn a pale green, casting the long ward in a sickly glow. Rows of cots stretch into the haze, each occupied by a figure bound in restraint webbing. They do not move, yet I feel the weight of their attention, like a mass of eyes pressing through closed lids. I begin my medici dictation, voice low, steady, ritualistic. Environment, penitent's wing, Ward 9. Temperature 6 degrees Celsius. Humidity negligible. Air composition within acceptable limits. Incense unknown origin. My stylus skitters across the slate. The prisoners are grotesque, but not through mutation of limb or face. Their flesh remains human, gaunt, scarred. It is their veins that betray them, threads of pale warp light coursing beneath translucent skin like cold lightning. The glow pulses in prime number rhythms, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, then resets. My Auspex records no heartbeat, but registers a constant psychic static. None speak, none can. Their mouths are sewn shut with black wire. Even so, I hear a low susurrus in the ward, not through ears but at the base of the skull, as if the warp light itself is whispering. I note the symptom and move to the nearest cot. Subject 1. Male, mid-30s, ident stripped. Warp light veins converging at sternum. Pupils rolled back. Skin temperature 2 degrees below ambient. When I touch his wrist, my gloves frost instantly. The ward floor is tiled in black and bone-white squares. At first glance, a checker pattern, but when I kneel to swab a sample, I notice the spacing. Squares grouped 2, 3, 5, 7, 11 apart in a spiral sequence. My Auspex tries to map it and fails. The pattern redraws itself between blinks. I dictate, anomalous geometry present. Pattern appears prime-based, possible containment glyph. My voice sounds distant, as if recorded elsewhere. I draw blood. The needle pierces easily, but no fluid rises. Instead, a translucent crystal forms around the tip, branching like frost. I pull back. The crystal continues to grow in midair, forming a delicate lattice of filaments that refract the warp-light veins. Within seconds, it shatters soundlessly and falls as dust. I attempt again with a second prisoner. Same result. Blood crystallizes before leaving the vein, hovering for a heartbeat, then fracturing into nothing. My medical instincts rebel. My oath demands a sample to diagnose, but this is not blood. The reliquary box in my satchel vibrates faintly, syncing with the prime number pulses. I place it on the floor tiles to free my hands. The vibration increases, then steadies. At the far end of the ward, a small servo skull detaches from the ceiling track. Its optics burn dim red. A parchment strip dangles from its jaw, covered in reverse script. It hovers toward me, chains clinking in reverse like inhaled chimes. I raise my Auspex. The skull transmits a data burst, no code I recognize. Then a voice emerges from its vox grill, a liturgical chant in high Gothic, each line numbered, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, counting upward. The cadence is like a countdown, but prime. I ask aloud, "What are you counting down to?" The skull tilts as if listening, then continues chanting. Its optics brighten, dim, brighten again. I record the phenomenon, note the time. The prisoners' warp light veins intensify as the chant rises. Their bodies remain motionless, but their restraints tremble, as if under strain. Frost creeps from the cot frames onto the floor tiles, tracing the prime number spiral. I move quickly between cots, scanning, logging. Each prisoner displays identical signs. Warp light veins, no heartbeat, blood crystallization, psychic static, all restrained, all silent, all pulses synchronized to the servo skull's chant. My breath fogs inside my rebreather mask. The lumen strips flicker. dim, then flare. My stylus writes without my hand guiding it, script spiraling outward across the slate, observe only repeated in shrinking letters until unreadable. I set the slate down. My gloves tremble. The reliquary box vibrates harder, sliding slightly across the tiles. I attempt a third sample using a sealed auto-syringe. The needle enters the prisoner's arm and draws a sliver of translucent fluid before freezing mid-suction. The syringe cracks. Tiny crystals form along my glove fingers. The air smells of ozone and old honey. The servo skull's chant shifts. Numbers reverse now, descending primes. 13, 11, 7, 5, 3, 2. Each word strikes like a hammer inside my head. I whisper a litany of the Emperor under my breath, trying to anchor myself. The warp-light veins flare brilliant white, then dim. The floor pattern seems to sink, spiraling downward into a pit that is not there. I step back, nearly tripping over the reliquary box. It vibrates in triple pulses, then stills. The servo skull stops its chant mid-number and hovers motionless, its optics dim to black. The warp-light veins across the prisoners flicker like dying stars. Silence falls. Heavy. Absolute. My auspex resets blank. I kneel, reaching for the box. My glove brushes its surface. Warm. The brass banding glows faintly. A line of script appears across the lid, unreadable but curling like smoke. The servo skull emits one last burst of static, a hiss shaped like my name, then collapses to the floor, parchment crumbling. I draw a steadying breath and note aloud. Ward 9 exhibits synchronized anomaly, linked to reliquary. Blood sample impossible. Servo skull initiated prime number countdown. My voice sounds wrong, doubled. I lift the box. It is heavier than before. The vibration is gone, but a faint heartbeat thrums against my palms. I whisper, "Emperor, guide me." The box clicks. A seam I never saw before runs along its lid. The brass bands retract with a sound like inhalation. Slowly, without my touch, the lid rises. Inside lies a single black feather. It is larger than my hand, edges ragged like torn velvet. It pulses, slow, deliberate, like a heart, contracting and expanding though no flesh surrounds it. Each pulse sends a ripple of cold air across my face. I cannot look away. The warp light veins in the prisoners flare once, synchronizing to the feather's beat. My own heart stumbles to match it. The feather lifts slightly from the box, suspended by nothing. A whisper curls from it, low and endless. Not words, but the memory of words. My slate records nothing but black. My auspex displays a spiral of primes converging on a single point. This point. I end my entry here. In Ward 9, the prisoners lie silent, their veins alight. A servo skull's parchment burns itself to ash, and in my hands a black feather pulses like a living heart, waiting. Log entry 04, Ward 9/Chapel Transit, timestamp unstable. I write to anchor myself. My hands shake, but the stylus moves. The black feather still pulses in its reliquary, a slow contraction like breath. Frost beads along the brass rim. My auspex registers one heartbeat, mine, and then another directly behind me. Distance, 0.2 meters. I turn. Nothing. Present tense. Cold breath at my neck. Lumen strips dimension. Feather beats once, twice. Skin prickles. Back to log. No entity visible. Secondary heartbeat persists. Source unknown. I speak the words to hear my own voice. It sounds hollow. Across the ward, a sister kneels before the open reliquary. She has appeared without footfall, armor bone white, mask blank. Her hands make a silent genuflection over the feather. Each motion is slow, deliberate, like gestures in a dream. She lowers her head until the mask nearly touches the pulsing barbs. Present tense. Feather's pulse accelerates. Air tastes of copper. Static at the edge of hearing. I whisper, "What are you doing?" But no sound leaves my mouth. My lips move. The vox records nothing. The sister does not look up. Log. Silent ritual underway. Sister, unresponsive. Feather resonance increasing. Auspex screen flickers. 2 heartbeats, then 3. Readings inverted again. A spike of warp interference. Coordinates unreadable. Present tense. Heat at my wrist where the feather's ink has stained me. My tongue tingles. Pressure in skull. The sister rises. She does not carry the feather, but the reliquary closes of its own accord with a soft sigh. She turns, gestures once, a beckon, and glides toward the far corridor. I follow. The ward tiles shift underfoot, prime, numbers rearranging in spirals. My boots leave no echo, but I hear footsteps, my own, behind me. Present tense. Frost on walls, melting upward, symbols sliding like oil. Breath smells of old parchment. We enter the chapel of the silent word. Doors open soundlessly, black iron etched with unreadable script. Inside is vast, cold, candleless. Rows of statues line the nave. Each stands robed, hands folded. But where faces should be, there is smooth stone. No eyes, no mouths. Log. Chapel interior matches station schematics only in outline. Statues faceless. Ambient temperature 4 degrees below corridor. No sound detected. Present tense. Heartbeats echo from stone. Mine and another. Feathers pulse under skin at sternum. I approach the nearest statue, its robes carved with letters too small to see. When I lean closer, the letters rearrange, spelling fragments of a litany I learned as a novice. I blink. They change again, new words, reversed. My Auspex shows no mass anomaly, but the script refuses capture. Log. Inscription, mutable on observation. Cognitive hazard suspected. I back away. The sister who led me kneels at the altar. She raises empty hands as if presenting the reliquary, though it is gone. Her mask tilts upward toward invisible stars painted on the vaulted ceiling. I feel pressure at my temples, like a silent choir pressing thought into shape. Present tense. Air vibrates. Lumen flickers. Smell of honey and ash. Auspex pings. 2 heartbeats again, directly behind me. I pivot fast. Nothing but statues. Yet my breath steams against something unseen. I lift the slate to record, but my hands are not my own. Words appear before I write them. Welcome back. Log. Possible psychic overlay. Identity anchor compromised. I force myself to narrate. I am Sister Medicae Verena, Ordo Hereticus Attaché. I am in the chapel. There is nothing behind me. My voice cracks. Present tense. Whisper at ear. My own voice, a second ahead. Statues lean imperceptibly closer. I take a step toward the altar. The floor tiles here are circles within circles, prime sequences converging. My boots feel heavier, as if stepping through liquid. The sister raises both hands. The faceless statues respond. A ripple of stone shifting under robes. Their inscriptions flare dim green, then extinguish. Log. Environmental change detected. Statues animate subtly. Warp light minimal but rising. Present tense. Feathers pulse in chest. Pressure behind eyes. Metallic taste of blood, though mouth uncut. I look again at the nearest statue. Letters on its robe now form my name, repeated downward like a waterfall. I blink. They change to a phrase. Do not speak. I swallow, throat dry. My Auspex flatlines, then spikes, showing infinite heartbeats for a fraction of a second. The screen cracks. Present tense. Air stills. Silence deeper than void. My ears ring. The sister at the altar lowers her hands. The reliquary appears before her, closed, though I did not see it. Carried. She bows her head. Log. Ritual culmination imminent. Unknown hazard. I step back toward the doors. They have sealed. No seam visible. The statues stand unmoving, but their robes now ripple as if in a breeze. Present tense. Temperature plunges. Condensation forms on my visor. My heartbeat loud. Second heartbeat louder. I press vox bead. Static shaped like a prayer spills into my ear. My own voice answers from everywhere at once. Stay. I drop the slate. It lands without sound. My ears pop painfully. Log. Audio perception failing. Possible vacuum on set. Present tense. Statues lean forward fractionally. Hands unfold. Stone fingers long, jointless. Inscriptions crawl like insects. I clamp hands over my ears though no noise exists. Pressure builds behind drums. Vision narrows. The sister kneeling at the altar does not move. She seems carved of the same stone now. The reliquary feather's pulse syncs with my skull. Log. Pain increasing. Ears bleeding. I reach for the door seam, find only smooth iron. No way out. My gloves smear red across the surface. Blood from my ears. Present tense. Statues move. Mouths open. No sound. Darkness inside deeper than stone. For a heartbeat, everything stops. The feather, the heartbeats, even my thoughts. Then a single drop of blood falls from my ear to the prime number floor and vanishes before touching. I end this entry here, in the chapel of the silent word, surrounded by faceless statues whose mouths gape in unison without sound, while my own ears begin to bleed. Consciousness returned like static, resolving into a weak vox signal. The Medici Bay's lumen strips pulsed dim white above her, humming in irregular intervals. Cold stone beneath the cot pressed into her shoulder blades. She did not remember walking here, did not remember leaving the chapel. Close third person. Varenne's eyes opened, but the world lagged. Movements came a heartbeat too late, like echoes. She tried to sit upright. Restraints lay loose around her wrists, never fastened, yet they bore the imprint of flesh pulled taut. Her slate sat on the tray beside the cot. The screen glowed, though she had not activated it. A log scrolled downward in her own handwriting. Whole litanies filled the page, invocations, prayers, fragments of high Gothic stitched together into verses she did not know. The words curved into spirals and ended in crescents. She reached for the stylus, but her fingers shook. The letters shifted under her touch, reshaping into newer lines as though they resisted being read. She tried to delete a passage. The slate locked. Her name appeared at the top of the entry in triplicate. Her oath whispered back, "Observe only." She had not written it here, but it blazed across the log in her hand. The hum of the lumen strips deepened. Between pulses she heard faint breathing. She turned. No one else occupied the bay. Yet auspex set in the wall flickered, showing vital signs that were not hers. Heartbeats, in plural, temperature beyond measurement, pressure that bent the line of the graph. Varenne swallowed. She pushed the sleeve of her robe up to adjust the Medici cuff. That was when she saw it. At the inside of her wrist, just above the veins, the skin bulged slightly. Dark barbs protruded beneath the flesh, moving faintly with each pulse of blood. The reliquary feather, its black shaft, its ragged edges, had sunk into her arm. Embedded. The pulse of it synchronized with her own heartbeat. She pressed her thumb hard against it. Pain seared through her arm. The feather flexed once and sank deeper, vanishing beneath the skin entirely. Only a faint shadow remained, as though inked under flesh. Her breath came short. She whispered a litany through clenched teeth, but the words faltered. The auspex monitors pulsed brighter, recording her elevated vitals, then abruptly split the line into two rhythms, two hearts, both inside her body. The slate continued its scroll. Lines assembled themselves into instructions. Fast 9 days. Seal the tongue. Prepare the vessel. She read them twice before recognition struck. The sisters. She had glimpsed them in passing since her arrival. Bone-white armor, blank helms, movements precise. But she had not known until now what they awaited. Not a meal of flesh and bread, not mortal sustenance. The feast was something else, a transference, a ritual in which hunger itself was passed from vessel to vessel. 9 days of fasting, silence. The moment the reliquary opened, the feather had chosen. She touched her wrist again. The skin was warm, beating faintly as though it housed more than blood. A soft scrape echoed through the Medici bay. She turned sharply. At the far wall, a sister stood in the shadows, still as carved stone. Her mask gleamed in the lumen flicker. She did not move, did not signal, but Varen felt the intent like pressure behind her eyes. "You are marked." Her mouth went dry. She forced herself to speak. "What do you want from me?" No answer, only silence. The slate buzzed faintly. New lines formed in her own script, though her hand lay motionless. "You will carry what we cannot hold. You will consume what we cannot speak." Varene's vision swam. She pressed both hands against her face, tried to steady her breathing. The sister faded into the dark like a shadow retreating. The bay smelled suddenly of burnt honey again, thick and cloying. She gagged. Her ears throbbed. Her temples beat in time with the feather's rhythm. She staggered toward the wash basin. The mirror above it reflected her face pale and drawn. Behind her shoulder, the reflection wavered, showing the outline of wings, black, skeletal, half-formed. She spun. The bay was empty. The mirror steadied. The Auspex monitors clicked softly. Data lines rewrote themselves into Gothic script. Words scrolled. 9 days, 9 mouths, 1 vessel. She forced herself back to the cot, gripping the edge until her knuckles blanched. She opened a fresh entry in the slate, trying to anchor her thoughts. But every letter she attempted transformed into a different word, an older word. She tried again, and the slate responded with the same. Observe only. A sudden vibration cut through the air. The Vox terminal at the bay's wall pulsed red, a docking alert. Varen's breath caught. She checked her chronometer. No transports scheduled, no relief ships inbound, no transmissions expected. The Vox pinged again, sharp, insistent. Symbols scrolled across the monitor. The Auspex translated automatically. Incoming vessel. Docking now. She froze. The sisters had not summoned a ship. No records listed one. The feather in her wrist pulsed once, violently. She lifted the Vox receiver with shaking hands. Static filled her ears, then a single tone, long and low, vibrating her skull. No voice, no call sign. Only the undeniable confirmation. Something had docked with Sanctorum Phage, and it was not expected. The lumen strips dimmed as though the station itself held its breath. Varen whispered into the static. "Who are you?" The line answered with silence, then one beat of a heart not her own. She let the receiver fall, eyes fixed on the sealed bay doors, waiting for the first sound of approach. The alert repeated 3 times, then ceased. No klaxons, no flashing lumen, just a single line of text on the Medicae bay's wall screen. Incoming vessel, docking now. Varen steadied her breath and gathered her satchel. The reliquary box pulsed against her wrist, where the feather had already sunk into flesh. Every beat of it set her nerves alight. She whispered a half-litany to still her hands, then stepped into the corridor. The passageways leading toward the docking ring were darker than before. Lumen strips failed every third panel, plunging long stretches into shadow. The Auspex trembled in her grip. Readings scrambled. She logged each step. Words clipped, clinical. Proceeding to verify airlock. Objective, confirm vessel identity. Her boots carried her through the ossuary spine where she had first walked among bone scrolls. Now frost climbed higher, threading the reliquaries like veins. A distant hum of engines reached her, but too faint, too smooth. Imperial drives always growled like chained beasts. This was softer, choral, like breathing stretched into harmony. The corridor ended at the docking vestibule. The hatch ahead loomed, its seals ringed with wax. As she approached, her Auspex screamed static. She tapped its screen and forced it into manual mode. The reading appeared clear. Airlock open. Her blood chilled. An open airlock should vent to void, suction, freezing, decompression. But the vestibule's pressure held steady. She keyed the wall rune. The hatch unsealed, splitting down its center. A rush of warmth brushed her face, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of incense. The chamber beyond yawned open to the void, but not black space. Instead, air shimmered, like liquid glass, bending starlight into ripples. Within the distortion floated motes of ash glowing faintly. Each drifted upward as though pulled toward unseen heavens. And beneath it all, breathing. Deep, rhythmic, layered in dozens of voices. A choral inhalation and exhalation, steady, calm, endless. Varen whispered into her vox, recording anomaly, airlock exposed, environment impossible, warm air, stable pressure, auditory phenomenon, choral respiration. Her auspex display recalibrated. Figures appeared in its ghost vision. She froze. A procession marched through the distortion. Silent sisters, tall and faceless. Each spectral figure carried a chained prisoner by the neck. The prisoners' faces flickered like failing hollow images, shifting between men, women, children, all ages, all expressions of terror. She pressed her back to the wall. Her eyes saw nothing but the shimmer of air, yet her auspex showed clear forms, armor, robes, restraints, bowed heads. Step after step, they advanced in silence. Her breath caught. Each sister turned its helm slightly, as if acknowledging her presence. But the visors reflected only void. The reliquary feather under her skin pulsed harder, straining against vein and bone. She clenched her wrist, trying to steady it. The procession continued past the threshold, fading as it reached the bulkhead. Yet the auspex still read them, recorded each step. Prisoners' faces shifted too quickly now, blurring into smears of flesh, impossible composites. Varen whispered to herself, not real. Not here, but the air tasted of sweat and iron. The choral breathing grew louder, filling the vestibule until her lungs strained to match its rhythm. She stumbled backward. The auspex slipped from her hands, clattering across the deck. Its screen cracked but continued to pulse with readings. Dozens of heartbeats, dozens of masses, all converging around her. She bent to retrieve it, and tripped. Her knee struck the deck hard. Pain flared, grounding her for one heartbeat. She looked down. A body lay sprawled across the floor. A silent sister. Real, not spectral. Armor cracked, robes soaked in dried blood. Her helm was shattered, mask fragments scattered across the frost. Varen's breath stopped. She had never seen one of the Null Maidens broken. Their discipline was absolute, their endurance legendary. But here one lay, lifeless, head twisted at an unnatural angle. She crawled closer despite herself. The face beneath the broken helm was pale, drained of blood, tongue absent as doctrine demanded. The mouth gaped soundlessly. Her medical instincts took hold. She reached for the sister's throat, seeking pulse though she knew there would be none. The skin was cold as iron, and then it moved. The corpse's chest expanded fractionally. A faint exhalation brushed Varen's cheek. She froze, every muscle locked. The mouth worked once, lips twitching. No tongue, only darkness. Yet sound escaped. It spoke her name, not through vox, not through thought, through air. A whisper formed in the void of its ruined throat. Varen! Blood roared in her ears. The reliquary feather in her wrist pulsed in perfect time with the corpse's exhale. The sister's empty eyes rolled upward. Breath rattled again, louder now. Vareni stumbled backward, boots slipping on frost. The auspex screamed warnings. Multiple life signs detected. Source. Corpse. She pressed herself against the bulkhead, lungs heaving. The corpse's mouth opened wider. Again the whisper. Varen. The choral breathing from the airlock joined it, voices folding into one word. Her name repeated endlessly, resonating through steel and stone. The vox in her ear crackled, carrying the same syllables as though transmitted from every deck at once. She could not breathe. Her slate fell from her grip. Her own name echoed from walls, air, dead flesh. The corpse drew one final breath, ribs expanding with a crack of bone. Varen clamped her hands over her ears, but the whisper still reached her. The ruined sister exhaled again, lips forming her name a third time, wet and broken. And Varen, frozen in terror, could only listen as the corpse without tongue continued to speak. Varen staggered back into Ward 9, her pulse still echoing with the corpse's whisper. The reliquary feather under her skin throbbed in uneven rhythms, tugging her forward as if it belonged not to her body, but to the ward itself. The lumen strips above burned low, their light fractured into long shadows that swayed without cause. The prisoners had been moved. She had left them restrained in endless rows, silent and inert. Now their cots were wheeled into concentric formations, spiraling out from the ward's center. Each body lay bound, mouths still wired shut, veins still glowing with pale warp light. But the arrangement was not random. From above it would form geometry, circles within circles, nested primes, a pattern that her mind recoiled from even as her eyes traced it. Her slate was already in her hand, though she did not recall drawing it. The screen scrolled with lines of script she did not remember writing. At first, she thought they were more corrupted litanies, but as she read, a realization rooted in her gut. These were instructions, ritual directives, step by step. They bore her handwriting, her signature at the bottom of each section, but the words belonged to something else. Arrange the vessels in prime sequence. Align their hearts to the spiral center. Bind their silence with wire. Let the feast begin with 9 days of hunger. She dropped the slate, but her eyes had memorized every line. Her voice cracked as she spoke into the log. Corrupted entries match my hand. Orders for ritual arrangement appear authored by me, though I have no memory of writing them. Possession suspected. Cognitive breach confirmed. The reliquary feather in her wrist pulsed once, harder, as if acknowledging the confession. At the far end of the ward, Mechanicus consoles glowed in cold green. She approached, each step dragging like wading through thick water. Cogitator readouts scrolled reactor output reports. Power flow redirected. Not to engines, not to life support, not to station defense grids. Every joule of energy was being siphoned toward the chapel of the silent word. She traced the diagrams on the monitor, fingers shaking. Power cables rerouted through unseen channels. Even the Medici bay where she had awakened ran secondary to the chapel's draw. The chapel was becoming the station's heart, its furnace, its altar. Behind her, movement. She turned. The sisters had gathered among the prisoners. Their bone-white armor gleamed faintly in the warped lumen glow. None carried weapons. Instead, each sister held a shallow basin filled with ash. One by one, they dipped gauntleted fingers and smeared the ash across their own armor, their robes, their flesh where the armor did not cover. Sigils emerged from the smears. Circles, lines, geometries not quite Euclidean. The ash clung as if magnetized, forming intricate scripts across their bodies. No sound accompanied the gestures, no prayer, only silence deeper than speech. Vareni whispered, "Why?" Her voice fell flat, no answer. Yet pressure built inside her skull, the impression of intent. The sisters did not look at her, but she felt their ritual hunger wrap around her breath, pulling faintly at her lungs. She forced herself to record. Silent sisters engaged in auto-ritual. Ash sigils applied upon skin. Purpose unknown. Reactor output redirected into chapel. Ritual structure suggests imminent event. Her voice faltered. The reliquary in her wrist burned now, black barbs curling beneath her skin. One sister stepped closer. She was taller than the rest, helm smooth, mask unmarked. In her left hand she carried no basin, only the ash already smeared across her pale faceplate. She advanced without footfall, presence immense. Vareni backed away, breath shallow. The sister halted within arm's reach. Slowly, deliberately, she raised both gauntlets. With a movement too slow to stop, she lifted the helm upward. Varen's breath caught. There was nothing beneath. No face, no flesh, no bone. Only a hollow void, darker than the surrounding air. The space seemed to drink the lumen light, pulling it inward, swallowing reflection. The void opened wider, as though inhaling. Varen felt her lungs seize. Her next breath left her body not through her lips but through her skin, drawn toward the emptiness. She staggered, clutching her throat. Her auspex tumbled from her grip. Its screen registered pressure drop, localized to her coordinates, as if atmosphere itself bent toward the sister's hollow visage. Numbers inverted, zeros flipped, graphs spiraled into nothing. She tried to scream. No sound emerged. Her breath streamed outward into the void. The reliquary feather in her wrist beat frantically, echoing the pull. Her vision narrowed to black rings collapsing. The sister leaned closer. The void expanded. Varena's hair tugged upward. Her veins felt hollowed. Blood rushed toward her wrist, drawn into the feather's shadow. Her slate scrolled one final line, written in her hand, though she did not touch it. The feast begins with silence. She fought to inhale, but the void devoured every attempt. Her body trembled, knees buckling. The last sensation was her own breath ripped free, vanishing into a hollow where no face should be. And then the void whispered her name. The void closed, then released. Vareni collapsed to the deck, lungs burning. Breath returned in ragged bursts. Her vision swam. The sister who had revealed only nothingness beneath her helm was gone, dissolved into air as though never present. Silence lingered, thick as ash. The reliquary feather in her wrist beat frantically. She pressed her palm against the wound, whispering fragments of oath. The auspex at her side glowed faintly, numbers scattered like fractured constellations. Somewhere distant, the prisoners exhaled in unison, muffled by their wired mouths. And then, presence, not sound, not sight. A weight pressed against her mind, steady and deliberate. Her head snapped upward, though her eyes saw only the dim ward. Images cascaded across her thoughts, vault doors opening, litanies carved into bone, wings folded in silence. The impressions resolved into form. The prioress. She did not walk. She did not breathe. She existed as an outline of thought pressed into Varen's skull, an immense will cloaked in silence. Armor taller, robes heavier, her helm smooth, blank, crowned with ash sigils that pulsed like embers. The prioress spoke without words, a psychic impression that scalded the mind even in its stillness. You wish to know what you carry. Varen tried to answer aloud, but her voice died in her throat. Only thought remained. The reliquary, the feather. Why me? The prioress's presence deepened. Varen felt her memories stirred like water. Fragments of her novitiate pulled forward, reciting prayers as a child, binding wounds in battlefield hospitals, whispering oaths at her ordination. Each memory dimmed at the edges, consumed even as she tried to cling to it. The feast is older than this station, older than the Imperium. We have kept it chained. You have opened it. Varen shook her head violently, though her body moved sluggishly, puppet-like. I didn't. I was ordered to observe. Observation is participation, the prioress impressed. Every record you kept, every word you spoke, every syllable you wrote, fed it. It does not devour food, it devours speech, memory. Flesh only after thought has gone. Visions assaulted her. Whole generations of sisters kneeling in circles, cots of prisoners arranged as vessels, reliquary feathers sprouting like black roots across wrists. The feast repeating, century after century, binding, a thing whose hunger could not be slain. Varen clutched her slate, desperate. Why me? Why now? Because the vessel weakens. We have carried the hunger for millennia. It stirs beyond our silence. We cannot contain what is older than us. You are chosen to bear the breach. Her breath faltered. She whispered aloud, though no one heard. No. The prioress's helm tilted, as though in patience. The psychic weight pressed harder. Images flooded Varena's vision, herself clad in bone-white armor, mask smooth and faceless. She stood among the sisters, her wrist bare save for the feather embedded in flesh. She lifted her own reliquary to the altar. Prisoners writhed in silence before her. She staggered back. That is not me. It will be. The feather has entered. Already it reshapes your flesh. Already your breath belongs to the feast. Her wrist throbbed. She ripped back her sleeve. The skin swelled where the barbed shaft lay beneath. A thin black line stretched upward toward her forearm, faint but visible, like ink creeping through veins. Her mind spun. You enslave yourselves to this thing. Why? The prioress's reply was slower, almost mournful. Not enslavement, containment. If it is not fed, it will feed itself. If it is not bound, it will spread. It has no name. We give it one through silence. Hunger. The word reverberated, filling her marrow. Hunger. The breath of countless prisoners. The fading of her own memories. The feathers pulse inside her veins. The ward seemed to tilt. Prisoners' veins flared in response, their prime rhythms syncing with the thought. Silence deepened, as though the very station held breath. Varenne tried again. If it cannot be controlled, why keep it? Why not destroy it? The prioress's helm bent close. You cannot kill absence. You cannot slay the void. You can only pass it from mouth to mouth, from vessel to vessel. We have borne it since the first feast. Now you bear it. Her stomach turned. She felt the shape of other memories pressed against her. Visions not her own. Women chained in silence centuries ago. Nulls carving sigils in ash. Children taken, tongues removed, raised to starve so the hunger could sleep. Their suffering folded into her skull like pages in a book. She cried out, I will not. The prioress did not answer. The psychic weight lingered, vast, inevitable. Her vision blurred again. In the haze she saw herself kneeling at the altar, ash smeared across her face, reliquary feather sprouting fully from her chest. The sisters bowed around her, silent acolytes. Behind them loomed the shape of the hunger, wings without flesh, mouth without tongue, a void lined with teeth of memory. Her heart pounded. The auspex in her hand screamed warnings, pulse irregular, double beats overlapping. She looked at her wrist. The feather bulged beneath the skin. Slowly, impossibly, a second barb sprouted beside the first, black as ink, curling outward before sinking back toward bone. It writhed, once, alive, moving toward her heart. Varenne screamed, clutching her chest. The slate fell from her grip, screen cracking. The word burned across it in her own hand. Hunger. The auspex would not steady. Every sweep came back blank, then surged with false readings. Hundreds of life signs, none consistent. Varenne gripped the console with bloodied gloves and forced herself to breathe in count, to anchor herself to rhythm. She keyed the astropathic relay. This is Sister Medicae Varenne, Ordo Hereticus Attaché, attached to Sanctorum Phage. Containment breach imminent. Coordinates, static. She tried again, adjusting gain. Repeat. Containment breach. Emergency quarantine protocol. Coordinates follow. Blank. The relay acknowledged transmission, but every packet returned empty. No text, no voice. Nothing but silence folded back to her. The machine was eating her words before they could leave the chamber. Her pulse raced. She tore her ident chip from its lanyard and pressed it to the reader. The slate should have displayed her clearance sigil, her name, her oath. Instead, the screen pulsed with a voided entry. No data, no Varenne. The ident was blank, as if she had never existed. Her breath came fast. She whispered to herself, I am Sister Medicae Varenne. She repeated it 3 times. The 4th time the syllables faltered. She bit her tongue and forced them again. Ver, en, ver. The last half slipped from memory like water through cupped hands. She pressed both palms against her skull. Anchor. I need an anchor. On her slate she scrawled a code phrase. 9 primes for silence. She recited it aloud. First strong, second slower. By the 3rd attempt, the word prime slipped, replaced by spiral. By the 4th attempt, she had forgotten the word 9. She scratched the phrase deeper into the slate, carving the letters until the stylus snapped. The slate glowed faintly, the words already rearranging. She staggered into the ward. The prisoners lay in their spiral formations, veins glowing, breathless. Each chest rose faintly, restrained silence humming against her skull. She chose one at random, desperate for proof of life. She cut the restraints, pried open the wire sewn into lips. Flesh tore, blood welled. She whispered, "Breathe. Speak. Tell me who you are." The prisoner's eyes rolled open, pale, clouded, but the face, her own. Not similar, not echo, her own face down to the scar at her jawline. She recoiled, stumbling backward. The prisoner whispered without sound, mouth-shaping syllables she could not hear. Her chest seized. The reliquary feather in her wrist burned, its second barb creeping upward toward her heart. She pressed her arm against her ribs, gasping. The prisoner continued to mouth words, her own words, the same report she had spoken minutes ago into the astropathic relay. Every line, every plea. She staggered back, heart racing. No, I am me. I am... But the name faltered again. The ward shimmered, rows of prisoners blurred, faces shifting between strangers and her own reflection. Each one wired shut, each one glowing, each one half-breathing her words. Her slate slipped from her grasp, striking the tiles. It scrolled in her handwriting. Observation is participation. Participation is transference. A sound split the silence. Alarms, not mechanical klaxons, but bells. Deep, resonant, liturgical bells. Their tone echoed through the station, as though rung from iron spires. Each strike reverberated in her skull, pulsing with the feather in her veins. One bell, 2, 3. The spiral of prisoners convulsed in unison, warp light brightening in prime rhythm. The auspex crackled and died. Varenne fell to her knees, palms pressed to ears. The bells rang on, solemn, ceremonial. A countdown, she realized. Every toll one step closer to the feast. Her skull thrummed. Her own heartbeat stuttered to match the cadence. The feather in her wrist clawed deeper toward her chest. She whispered the code phrase again, clinging to the words. 9 primes for silence. 9 spiral silence. But the syllables slipped. Only the bells remained, tolling inside her mind. The slate flickered once more. One final line scrawled across it in her hand. The feast begins at 0. The bells tolled louder, filling every corridor of Sanctorum Phage. And Verena knew the countdown had begun. The bells did not stop. They tolled until time itself lost measure, until Verene's pulse fell in rhythm with iron. When they ceased, silence arrived with the weight of ritual. The chapel of the silent word opened before her. She did not recall crossing its threshold, yet she stood within its nave. The air was heavy, unmoving. The reliquary feather in her wrist pulsed hard enough to blur her vision. The sisters assembled. They moved without command, arraying themselves in concentric circles around the central void. Ash sigils burned faintly across armor and flesh. Each helm tilted inward, faceless masks reflecting the void as though nothing else existed. The prisoners followed without walking. Restraints snapped open. Bodies lifted from cots, suspended by unseen hands. Their mouths tore wider as black wire dissolved. Lips cracked, jaws strained. They levitated into the center of the spirals, arrayed above the sisters like offerings. Sound collapsed. Her ears rang once, then died. No hymn, no breath, no rustle of robes. Only sensory fragments remained, impressions pressed against her body. Ash, cold marrow, heartbeats like drums. She clutched her slate, but words fractured. Every attempt to record returned blank lines. Only fragments. Ash, marrow, drums. The reliquary feather burned. She tore back her sleeve. 2 barbs now, pulsing, both stretching toward her heart. The air thickened. She gasped, but lungs took nothing. Breathing ceased. Still she lived. Her inner narration shattered, reduced to short bursts. Frost on. Lips. Eyes rolled white. Veins glowing. The sisters did not falter. They knelt in perfect circles, arms spread, ash dripping from gauntlets. Prisoners writhed overhead, mouths yawned wider by invisible force. No sound issued. Silence swallowed everything. And then, motion. The void at the chapel's center bent. Space folded inward like cloth drawn tight. Darkness condensed into shape. She saw wings first. Not flesh, not bone. Absence. Gaps in reality where wings should be. They unfurled with the sound of nothing. Edges outlined only by the lack of light. A torso followed, humanoid, yet wrong. Shoulders draped in fragments of scripture, half burned. Hands ended in shadows that stretched like claws. Its head, a hollow mask of nothing, shifting, featureless. The warp entity. Hunger made manifest. The sisters pressed foreheads to the ground. Prisoners arched in air, veins flaring, mouths stretched until blood streamed down their chins. Their silence screamed louder than any voice. Varen staggered forward though she did not choose to. The feather dragged her body like a leash. Each step sank deeper into the geometry inscribed on the floor. Circles within primes, primes within spirals. The chapel thrummed. Her inner thoughts broke further. Cold marrow, ash on tongue, drums in skull. The entity moved. Wings of absence beat once. Frost spread outward across the chamber, rimming statues, glazing prisoners' lips. Their bodies trembled, eyes wide but blind. It grew larger, each pulse doubling its presence until it filled the nave with absence. The lumen strips burst one by one. Candles ignited from nothing, casting shadows without flame. Her breath ceased again. Heartbeat stuttered, but she did not collapse. The feather sustained her, pumping a rhythm that was not her own. Her slate flickered, recording fragments she had not written. Banquet. Silence. Vessel. She tried to scream. Nothing emerged. The entity lifted its hollow face. Its absence turned toward her. Every sister froze, heads still bowed. Prisoners ceased writhing, mouths locked open in mute agony. The entire chapel held its breath. The void face fixed on Varen. Her mind convulsed. She heard no sound, yet she understood. The meaning arrived fully formed, not words, but comprehension, heavy and absolute. You carry me now. Her knees buckled. She dropped the slate. It cracked, screen filling with black. The feather in her wrist erupted in pain, both barbs surging upward, beating like hearts. Her vision narrowed to tunnels of dark. The entity unfurled its wings wider. The chapel walls bent inward. Statues cracked. Air crystallized into frost patterns that spelled her name. It addressed her again. No sound, only meaning. You opened the feast. You are the vessel. You are mine. Her lungs screamed for air. Her heart skipped. The second barb pierced higher toward her chest. She fell, palms striking cold stone, eyes locked on the void that spoke without voice. The entity leaned closer, shadow wings brushing her skin. Its hollow face was inches from hers. No sound passed, yet she understood every syllable. It was speaking directly to her. The void face tilts closer. Her body stiffens. The reliquary feather pulses once, twice. Then her vision folds inward. She is drawn, not pulled by limbs or air, but by geometry. The entity opens and she slips between its wings into a place that is not a place. Near present tense. There is no floor, no sky, only inverted liturgies spiraling in the dark. Verses written backward, prayers turned inside out, words collapsing into themselves. They rise and fall like waves. Each syllable dissolves into black ash before reaching her ears. She drifts. The feather in her wrist guides her deeper. Her heartbeat slows, yet each pulse echoes as if multiplied by thousands. Images strike. The first feast, Sisters kneeling on cracked stone, prisoners bound in prime number circles. A woman in hospitaller robes stands at the center, slate in hand. She looks terrified. She looks exactly like Vareni. Blink another feast, centuries later. A different void station, same ritual geometry. A medic clutches a reliquary feather, her handwriting spilling across scrolls she does not remember writing. Her mouth sewn shut mid-cry. She wears Varen's face. Blink more feasts, more centuries. Always the same shape. Sisters in silence, prisoners levitating. A medic marked as seed. Her body shifts with each vision, but always her reflection. She is not the first. She is one in a line stretching backward beyond memory. The realization crashes. Each time the feast stirs, the Inquisition sends a witness. Each time the witness is consumed. Each time the hunger renews its chain through them. Her voice breaks out, trembling. Why me? The liturgies swirl. A spectre forms ahead. It is herself. Pale, robed, but eyes hollow. Her lips move without sound. She gestures with open palms as though offering a bargain. Varen whispers again, "Speak." The spectre does not, but meaning arrives anyway. We all made the choice. Varen shakes her head. I won't. The spectre tilts her head, hands spread wider. Chains spiral from her wrists, looping into the void. The chains end in reliquary feathers, hundreds of them, beating like black hearts. Meaning presses harder. You already have. She reels back, clutching her chest. The barbs creep higher toward her sternum. Blood thrums beneath her skin, glowing faintly. Another vision strikes. Millennia collapse into moments. The feast never ends, it only pauses between vessels. Each medic, each witness, each silence offered is a link in the chain. Without them, the hunger would pour unchecked into the Imperium. She cries out, "Then free me!" The spectre smiles faintly, her own smile. Freedom is silence. The geometry shifts. The inverted liturgies twist tighter, pulling her downward. She tumbles through prayers, turned inside out, syllables that burn when thought. The ash clings to her skin. Her tongue grows heavy. She reaches for the spectre. Their hands meet, flesh against absence. The bargain becomes clear. Anchor the entity. Bind it again. But the cost, total erasure of her voice. No more logs, no more prayer, no name. The spectre mouths one last phrase. She does not hear it, but she knows it. Erase yourself, or all will be erased. Her chest heaves. She wants to scream, but no air forms words. The reliquary feather beats against bone, hungry. The inverted liturgies roar louder, though no sound exists. Statues of the chapel flicker in and out, mouths open. Prisoners' faces appear, wearing her reflection, tearing their lips wider. She shakes her head, whispering, I can't. I am still me. The spectre fades, leaving only chains and feathers beating. The void closes tighter, the geometry pressing her from all sides. She sees herself kneeling at the altar again, silence absolute, feathers bursting from her chest. She sees the sisters bowing, relieved. She sees the hunger folding back into itself. The way forward is clear. To anchor the entity, to seal it again, she must surrender her voice completely. Her mouth trembles, blood spills from her ears. She tastes ash. The feather pulses once more, harder, the second barb driving toward her heart. Her slate flickers into her vision. A line scrawls across it in her own hand. Erase the tongue. Hold the chain. The geometry twists tighter. The hunger looms. She clutches her throat, trembling. Choice hammers in her skull. And the chapter ends as she realizes salvation demands complete silence, her own speech erased forever. The geometry shattered. Varen gasped as sensation returned, cold stone beneath her knees, incense thick in her throat, the chapel of the silent word all around her. The entity still towered at the center, wings of absence spread across the nave. Prisoners hung suspended in spirals, their mouths forced open in silence. The sisters knelt in ash-smeared circles, motionless, heads bowed. Her wrist burned. The reliquary feather writhed beneath the skin, its second barb scraping bone, pulling itself upward toward her heart. She clutched her chest, lungs heaving. The vision lingered. Only silence could anchor it. Silence, absolute. Her slate lay shattered at her side, but fragments still glowed with words she had not written. Erase the tongue. Hold the chain. She staggered to her feet. Hands shook, yet training steadied them. She searched her satchel. Medici oils, surgical blades, sterile bandages, and a small vial of anointing chrism used for battlefield last rites. She laid them out on the cold stone like relics. Binharic hymns thrummed faint in the walls, the residual hum of Mechanicus systems channeling reactor output into the chapel. She closed her eyes, lips moving in patterns she barely remembered. Not words, but pulses. Binary prayer, fragmentary rhythms of logic and litany combined. Her vox relayed them as bursts of static. 1011-0-1. Improvised, fractured, but enough. The chamber trembled, lumen strips flickering in time with her chant. She dipped gloved fingers into the vial of chrism, tracing the sign of the Aquila across her lips, then across the reliquary wound at her wrist. The oils hissed against skin, burning cold. The feather responded, its pulse accelerating, demanding. Her voice cracked. If silence is the price, then silence I give. She lifted the surgical blade. For one heartbeat she hesitated. Memories flooded. First hymn learned in the schola. Battlefield triage with whispered prayers to calm the dying. Her own name spoken aloud to anchor identity. Each one fragile. Each one would vanish. The entity stirred, wings flexing. Prisoners convulsed mid-air. The sisters remained bowed, still chained in silence, not chosen, but imposed. She pressed the blade against her tongue. Cold steel. Then pain. She cut. Blood filled her mouth, hot and metallic. She forced herself not to cry out. The blade clattered to the floor, slick with red. Her tongue fell into her gloved palm, twitching once before stilling. The reliquary feather surged. She held the bleeding flesh above her wrist. Blood spilled down, soaking into skin. The feather erupted outward, piercing through flesh and bone. It tore from her arm, barbs writhing, and fused against her sternum like a parasite seeking heart. Agony consumed her. She collapsed, chest arching. The feather melted into her skin, vanishing beneath bone, leaving only faint black veins radiating outward like cracks in glass. Her scream did not emerge. Air moved, but no sound followed. Her silence was total. The sisters reacted as one. Their heads lifted, void faces flickered. For the first time since her arrival, their blank helms seemed to shiver, as though chains had broken inside them. Their hands unclenched. Armor shifted like exhalation. Relief flickered, not joy, but release. One sister pressed gauntlet to her own throat. Another raised eyes heavenward. None spoke, none could. But their silence was different now, chosen, not imposed. The entity convulsed. Its wings folded inward, collapsing upon themselves. The chapel shook, statues cracked. Prisoners screamed without sound, their mouths still torn open, eyes rolling back. Their bodies fell limp, drifting downward as though gravity had returned. The sisters remained kneeling, faces tilted toward Varen. They bowed to her silence, to the blood sacrifice already done. Varen staggered upright, her voice gone, throat raw. Breath rasped but carried nothing. She raised hands slick with blood. The reliquary feather pulsed beneath her sternum, beating in rhythm with the station itself. The entity turned inward. Its wings dissolved into spirals of black ash. Its hollow face collapsed into a whirlpool of absence. The geometry screamed, though no sound emerged, spiraling down into the reliquary, fused inside her chest. Her body convulsed. She fell to her knees. Cold marrow sensations spread from sternum outward, filling veins with shadow. The sisters did not move. Prisoners lay scattered across the floor, unmoving. She clutched her chest, eyes wide. The entity was not fleeing into the warp. It was not banished back into Imperium. It was collapsing into her. The black veins spread across her skin like cracks of obsidian. Her heartbeat faltered, then surged, louder, stronger, foreign. Wings of shadow flickered across her back, not real, but reflected in the cracked marble. The feather beat inside her chest, each pulse a wordless command. She tried to cry out, but her tongue was gone. No sound, no name, only silence. And into that silence, the hunger poured. Varen's scream never left her throat. The absence in her chest devoured every attempt at sound. The reliquary feather had fused wholly with her sternum, its barbs pulsing like twin hearts. Her body convulsed. Blood streaked her chin. Black veins spread outward in branching patterns, feathering across her skin. She fell to her knees, fingers clawing at stone. Then perception widened. The chapel walls dissolved. The ward dissolved. Flesh, stone, steel, all became translucent. She saw the station not as a structure, but as an organism. The reactor thrummed like a heart. The corridors pulsed like arteries. Every sister, every prisoner, every lumen strip was not separate but part of one body, one hunger. Her own thoughts stretched, unraveling into cosmic abstraction. She was inside and outside herself. She tasted void metal. She smelled prayers turned to ash. She felt time as texture, woven threads fraying under her touch. The sisters knelt in their circles, but to her widened vision, they were not women. They were conduits, silent mouths channeling absence. Their void faces opened wider, and she saw through them into the raw wound of the warp, sealed for millennia by their silence. The prisoners' bodies flickered. Some were corpses, some were shells of memory, some were only echoes. Yet all fed into her. Their veins of pale warp light bent inward, dissolving into her chest. The hunger had been theirs to carry. Now it became hers alone. Her mind spasmed. She forced a single command outward, not in voice, not in thought, but in silent astropathic pulse. Her body became the transmitter, her veins the conduit. The signal flared across Imperium, clipped and absolute. Coordinates quarantined. Do not approach. The words left her like blood, carrying pain with them. Somewhere deep, she felt the ripple. Astropaths across the sector shuddering, scribes transcribing warnings they did not comprehend. The Emperor's servants would mark this place cursed. Her chest split further. Feathers tore through skin. Black and ragged, they sprouted from shoulders, ribs, spine. Each plume beat faintly, shedding motes of shadow. She looked down at her hands, nails elongated, curling, like quills. Flesh cracked, hollowing. And still she stood. The sisters raised their heads. For the first time their silence shifted. Less burden, more reverence. They looked upon her not as witness, not as medic, but as vessel. One by one they lowered themselves into deeper kneel. Gauntlets pressed to stone. Helms bowed, ash sigils glowed faintly across their armor. The prioress's outline dissolved into nothing, leaving only Vareni in her place. She realized then, she was no longer Sister Medici Varen. Her name was gone, erased with her tongue. What remained was function. She was reliquary. She was anchor. She was prioress. The chapel vibrated. The warp entity collapsed further, wings folding into her chest. The void face melted into her sternum, leaving only black light behind her eyes. Her widened perception reached outward again. She felt the void station itself shift. Thrusters failing, guidance locked. Gravity bent subtly. The structure tilted, creaking, beginning a slow drift. Trajectory, imperial space. She staggered to the altar, feathers dragging behind her like wings. She spread her bloodied hands across the cracked stone. The signal in her skull repeated, insistent, unending. Do not approach. Do not approach. Do not approach. Yet she knew the Imperium would not heed. They would send more witnesses, more seeds. The feast always required another. Her chest burned. Every heartbeat carried the hunger deeper into her marrow. Every breath drew feathers longer. She was containment now, but containment temporary. The cycle would repeat, though she might hold it for a time. The sisters remained kneeling. They did not rise. They did not resist. They accepted her as the new prioress, the vessel chosen. Above them, statues cracked. Ash drifted downward like snow. The prisoners lay silent, their mouths still forced open but empty, drained of what little they had left. The reliquary feather in her chest pulsed one final time and fused completely, vanishing beneath skin. Only the wings of absence marked her now. Her widened sight dimmed. The chapel resolved into stone and frost again. Her body trembled with the weight of what she had taken. She staggered, but the sister's silence steadied her. She raised her arms, feathers spreading. Her bloodied lips moved, but no sound emerged. Words existed only in thought, in impression. I am silence. I am vessel. I am anchor. The void station groaned, metal strained. Outside, stars shifted as Sanctorum Phage began its slow, inevitable drift toward the Emperor's domain. The sisters bowed lower still. Ash sigils flickered, extinguished. Their chains had been passed to her, and for the first time in centuries, they were unburdened. Verena, no longer Verena, closed her eyes. The hunger burned inside her heart. She held it as long as she could. And as the station turned its nose toward Imperial space, every sister bent knee to her, their new prioress, while silence reigned, eternal. The Imperial Navy's voidcraft intercepted Sanctorum Phage on trajectory sensors, noting the drift pattern, its life signs anomalously low, yet pulsing faintly in an irregular rhythm. The retrieval team's shuttle hugged the station's hull, magnetically locked, thrusters ticking in subtle corrections. Their boots hissed against airlocks and deck plating, echoing faintly through the metal corridors like distant percussion. Every surface shimmered with frost and the residual heat of millennia-long isolation. Inside, the Medici bay was empty. Bloodstains on the walls had dried to iron-brown crusts. The hololithic screens flickered intermittently, showing corrupted logs and distorted Auspex readings. The first lieutenant muttered curses, tracing lines of code she had left. The logs were not merely corrupted. They seemed to resist understanding, resisting continuity. Data slate entries looped on themselves, timestamps collapsing into impossible overlaps. The retrieval team followed protocol. Each member wore sealed rebreathers, scanning with Auspex as they advanced. Small servo skulls trailed behind, their lenses flickering weakly. Motion sensors ticked in confusion, detecting phantom presences that vanished upon approach. An atmosphere of unease settled like cold resin across the deck. From the point of view of the lead inquisitorial acolyte, the logs were a labyrinth. He read her last entries with growing dread. The disappearance of her tongue, the fusion of the feather, the transformation into a living reliquary. Words seemed written simultaneously forward and backward. Some lines pulsed faintly in black light within the hololith. The acolyte shivered. The logs were no longer narrative. They were a conduit. Flashes of the station's dark corridors invaded his vision. He saw a figure, tall and impossibly feathered, moving without sound. It reflected his worst imaginings. Black wings brushing along walls, claws sparking against metal, shadow pooling beneath the soles of unseen feet. He blinked, and the figure vanished, leaving only the residual chill of void absence and faint metallic scent. He paused over a data slate entry detailing the final moments of her containment ritual. The language was fragmented. Some words were human, some incomprehensible. Yet he understood intent. Every line resonated with psychic weight. A silent warning pressed into the marrow of his mind. It spoke of anchoring, of sacrifice, of silence absolute. The retrieval crew moved cautiously, unaware. The station's geometry felt wrong. Floors tilted subtly. Walls shifted imperceptibly, as if breathing. Light from their auspex strobes fractured into impossible angles. The acolyte's gut tightened. The station was alive, or had been made alive by her. The black-feathered form had not left. She lingered in the space between perception and matter, stalking the team without triggering any sensors. Every so often, a wing stirred faintly overhead. No sound reached their helmets. No turbulence registered on auspex. But the acolyte felt it, a pressure along his spine. The sensation was intimate, invasive, as if someone, or something, was mapping the curvature of his bones. He risked glancing upward once. Shadows folded over themselves. A single black feather fell slowly through 0G, fluttering past the edge of vision, then vanished before it could be grasped. The logs became the team's orientation. They were told to consult them for corridor mapping and hazard awareness. Yet each page contradicted the previous. Repeated instructions appeared on different decks. Some entries described corridors that did not exist. Others described voids opening in walls, eyes peering from within panels. The acolyte realized they were being led by her mind, led through her last perception, without her voice or presence ever leaving the station. An alarm flared faintly in the control deck, not physical but psychic. The acolyte froze. His auspex showed nothing unusual, yet he felt a tremor of awareness sweep the team, an involuntary recognition that something was watching. Footsteps echoed where none could be. One recruit spun, pointing toward a corner where the shadows pooled unnaturally. The sound of wings brushed the air like silk tearing, soft enough to go unrecorded, persistent enough to gnaw at sanity. The acolyte's fingers traced the data slate entries in frantic rhythm. Her words insisted on silence. Her final pulse of astropathic command echoed faintly across Imperium, reverberating in corridors as though carved into stone. Do not approach. Do not approach. He swallowed. The warning was not for them alone. It was for him personally. And yet it had been delivered silently, impossibly, into his mind. Each corridor they entered brought faint evidence of her presence. Scratched feathers appeared in the wall's plating. The Medicae bay's floors bore shadows that could not be cast by their lights. Panels flickered to reveal a form standing just beyond their vision, coalescing and dispersing in the peripheral. The acolyte knew the figure could never be captured by lenses or auspex. She existed between perception and matter, a living reliquary now. He reviewed the retrieval protocol again, comparing it with her corrupted notes. The lines between instruction and memory had collapsed. They were being guided not by logic, not by schedule, but by her enduring consciousness, now integrated with the station itself. Every action of the team was anticipated, predicted, absorbed into her perception before it occurred. At last, in the central Medicae bay, the acolyte's attention fixed on a small sealed box atop the operations console. It bore no insignia, save a single black feather embossed into its surface. The handwriting, tiny, deliberate, spelled out his name. He reached toward it, fingers trembling. The aura around the box was thick with psychic weight. He could sense her, feel the hunger contained, within her flesh, pulsing faintly through the station's steel and plating, tethered now to the feather. The object hummed subtly, vibrating in anticipation, as if it were aware he would pick it up. The team gathered behind him, unaware of the danger, unaware that the simple act of opening this box could trigger the full depth of her containment. The acolyte knew instinctively this was no ordinary reliquary. It was a key, a seed, a message, and perhaps a curse. He lifted the lid. Inside rested a single black feather, perfectly intact, its pulse faint, yet insistent. The air seemed to warp slightly, subtle bends in perspective, as if the feather's presence alone distorted perception. He sensed the silent wings above, felt the consciousness watching him, felt the hunger shifting, acknowledging its next guardian. The retrieval team looked at him expectantly. Auspex readings remained inert, lenses recording nothing. Only he perceived the faint rustle of feathers, the brush of wings overhead, the pull of attention toward himself. Her imprint was everywhere and nowhere. And then he understood fully. The feast, the containment, the transformation, all had not ended. It had merely moved, anchored in flesh now, and this feather would guide the next stage. His name written there was not invitation, but command. A final echo resonated in his skull, silent and unyielding. Do not approach. Yet already, the imperceptible wings circled closer. The acolyte's pulse quickened. He closed his eyes briefly, sensing the shadow of her presence in every corridor, in every panel, in the soft hiss of venting air. The feather waited in the box, addressed personally, sealed with intent, a silent herald of the hunger contained within her flesh. And in that moment he realized. The return transmission was not from the station to them. It was from her flesh, from her mind, from the reliquary. She was still watching, still present, still inescapable. He did not speak. The feather did not pulse faster. Yet he knew what he must do. The acolyte's hands trembled as he activated the vox recorders, each unit humming faintly in the dim light of Sanctorum Phage. He spoke slowly, carefully, dictating observations for the Inquisition's archives. Each word felt heavier than the last, a physical weight pressing against his throat, an intangible pull that seemed to draw meaning from his speech, even as it left his lips. The logs were meant to preserve the station's status, to document the retrieval, to record anomalies. Yet already, he sensed the ineffable emptiness gnawing at comprehension. He began by describing the corridor geometries, the folding angles of the station, as though it breathed with subtle rhythm. Plating warped, panels shimmered, thresholds led to impossible spaces. Despite the retrieval team's thorough inspection, nothing in physical documentation reflected the psychic distortions. Auspex's recorded silence, ventilation ducts whispered. Nothing, yet he felt the black-feathered presence everywhere. Each corridor's shadow seemed to flex, expand and contract, an echo of the winged form now tethered to the station in ways that defied natural law. He paused, glancing at the sealed box containing the reliquary feather. Its pulse was irregular, a slow heartbeat within the encasement, resonating faintly through the floor plates. The acolyte noted its dimensions, the sheen of its obsidian quill, the impossibility of its warmth. It was a relic, a vessel, a warning, yet also a command. Every fiber of his mind, every involuntary neural impulse seemed to acknowledge her presence through that single black barb embedded in the box. He felt her consciousness orbiting him, tethering the vessel to the station, to the drift, to him. Through the recording feed, he described the Medicae Bay last visited. Stains of congealed blood lined the floors, yet the patterns formed a geometry not entirely chaotic. Lines intersected at angles that suggested intentionality, that suggested a ritual immemorial. Feathers had scratched themselves faintly across the steel, as if the act of containment in flesh had inscribed a permanent signature onto the environment. Each mark seemed to pulse faintly as he moved through the bay, a heartbeat echoing from the relic that no lens or auspex could capture. The acolyte struggled to remain coherent as he recounted the sisters' positions. They were frozen in genuflection, heads bowed, void masks intact, yet imbued with a faint shimmer of relief. Their gestures had the meticulous precision of automatons, yet their alignment suggested a deeper comprehension, as if their postures were responses to the Medica's final act of sacrifice. The acolyte traced each form carefully, noting nothing in auspex returned. The sisters were as present as they were absent, real and spectral simultaneously, frozen in a state that defied empirical categorization. He described the feather's pulse again. It had accelerated, though not in accordance with any biological rhythm. Its energy radiated a subtle warp frequency he could feel against his skull. He sensed her within. a gestalt consciousness distributed across metal, flesh, and void, tethered yet autonomous. He imagined the Medica's black feathered form moving beyond the halls, beyond the hull, beyond the station entirely, and the thought was accompanied by a nausea of comprehension. The containment was effective, but it had fused with life itself, reshaping the boundaries between observer and vessel, reality and perception. Footsteps echoed where none could exist. The acolyte instinctively looked toward the chapel. The stained glass windows, warped by time and drift, caught faint light from the retrieval ship, refracting it into impossible patterns across the floor. Within that fractured light, he glimpsed the final manifestation, a winged silhouette rising behind the glass, vast and impossible. Wings arched impossibly, forming geometric patterns that mirrored the sigils the sisters had inscribed upon themselves. He could not discern flesh from shadow. The form was simultaneously her, the station, and the void itself. His last notes faltered. Words drew toward emptiness even as he recorded. He felt syllables slipping from consciousness, sense leaking from language. Every sentence became a struggle against the silent consumption that had stalked him since arrival. He wrote of the feather in the box, its pulse steady but impossibly alive, and of the sisters, of their obedience and liberation, of the drift into Imperial space with coordinates marked ominously, "Do not return." The retrieval team moved cautiously, unaware of the metaphysical weight pressing upon the acolyte. They inspected equipment, checked integrity of hull plating, verified life support loops, yet the black feathered presence rendered all readings incomplete. Auspexes detected no aberration, scans revealed nothing, yet he sensed her orbiting, observing, confirming the ritual's success through the very act of being unseen. Fragments of her psychic imprint invaded his perception. He recalled the Medicae's ritual of sacrifice, the bleeding of tongue into the feather, the fusion of flesh and warp hunger. Every microsecond of observation seemed compressed with millennia of accumulated memory from past feasts, threading through his mind with clarity that left him shaking. He glimpsed prisoners rising and falling in ceremonial repetition, not in physical space, but in a psychic lattice that coexisted alongside the real corridors. Their faces flickered, sometimes his own, sometimes hers, sometimes unknowable. He recorded every flicker, every pulse, every shadow. He wrote of the void pressing against sensory perception, of the whispers that contained no sound, of the internal vibrations that spelled awareness without language. The feather's pulse now dominated his perception. Time seemed to lag in its presence. He felt tethered to her as she had been tethered to the station. Containment was not a barrier, but a bond. Her consciousness spiraled outward, yet with each spin, it reaffirmed the mortal shell, the vessel that housed the hunger without surrendering to it. He noticed the chapel's cruciform geometry echoing her final positioning, a lattice of ash, blood, and feather quills. The light bent strangely through fractured stained glass, highlighting sigils that had no origin, no history outside this particular moment. He imagined her wings unfurling to fill the void between panels, the form eclipsing reality itself, expanding into a halo of observation and dominion. She was everywhere and nowhere. He felt her behind his eyelids as he wrote. The acolyte's words faltered completely when he reached the station's coordinates. He marked them clearly in final observation, the trajectory leading deeper into uncharted space, drifting slowly, deliberately, marked, "Do not return." He felt the weight of her awareness pressing silently into his mind. The act of recording this was both documentation and invocation, a final acknowledgement of what had been accomplished and what had been set into motion. He paused to listen. No sound met him. The Vox recorders were silent. The crew was unaware of the temporal distortion, the psychic consumption, the black-feathered consciousness coiling through metal and flesh alike. He understood fully that the final image, the ultimate record, would not be captured by any lens or auspex, but would exist only in memory, in perception, in psychic resonance. He raised his gaze to the stained glass window again. There she was, silhouetted, winged, infinite. The chapel's light fractured across her form, highlighting a geometry impossible to describe. The acolyte felt comprehension strain at its limits. His speech was already faltering internally, syllables collapsing before reaching articulation. He scribbled in shorthand, hoping the archive would interpret the intent. She had become the feast, the vessel, the hunger itself contained in silence. The final entry read simply, "Coordinates quarantined. Do not return." Even as he wrote it, he sensed the words fading, slipping into the void she now inhabited fully. The winged silhouette rose once more, a shadow of black feathers against fractured light. His mind recoiled at the impossibility of recording her fully. The Vox feed cut suddenly. The last image remained. A perfect, impossible silhouette against colored glass, wings extended, the pulse of the feather echoing through his consciousness. Every other trace of sound, movement, and observation fell away. Only the black pulse remained, a silent heartbeat across space and mind, marking the feast as eternal, anchored in flesh, in feather, in the drift of a station that would not return. And so the station, the Medicae, the sisters, and the hunger continued, intertwined in silence. The acolyte's record ended, but the containment endured, anchored in flesh, in feather, in the impossibility of returning. Feast without end.